Dom Crispino is here. Andrew McKenna is here. And Richard Luthman is here. Very quickly, I want to get your gentlemen's take on this. We all remember Nicholas Cruz, the shooter at Douglas High School in Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland. The judge presiding over that death penalty sentencing evidently reversed course yesterday, deciding to start over with jury selection, something that she said 2 days earlier would happen at the prosecution's request. Quote, I was going to grant the state's motion without prejudice, but at this time I'm going to dismiss the state's motion as premature. The prosecution requested starting the process over because the judge had excused 11 prospective jurors who said they could not follow the law before attorneys for both sides got to question them. The assistant state attorney, Carolyn McCann, said that a mistake was made, calling the situation a miscommunication, and filed a motion asking the judge to strike the jury panels. Quote, there's too many issues at this point. It's better to just start fresh. Richard, I believe you're in the Sunshine State, so I'll begin with you.
Well, this is a capital case. So I think the judge did the right thing here because there's the most scrutiny on capital cases. Now, the point we're at is there's no question as to guilt. He's pled guilty. The question here is a case of life and death, and it's a sentencing. So the lawyers for Nicholas Cruz are trying to make the case that he should basically serve life in prison. And that's really what's on the table. It's either going to be a death penalty or a life in prison. And to sustain a death penalty decision by the jury, if there's any type of irregularity, there's any type of error at all, it could be fatal. So I think it's the right thing to start over and try to get this right, rather than have to wait a couple of years and get sent back down for a resentencing.
Dom, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a real blunder by the judge. I mean, just 11 people say, hey, we can't be fair. And you say, okay, you can go.
Right.
I mean, you always turn them over to the attorneys, and then they'll probe.
Right.
To see if they're really saying that, if they really believe that, and, take them at their word. Well, maybe not.
Andrew McKenna, any thoughts on this one?
My only thought is that they certainly had to fill out questionnaires prior to serving or being potential jurors. And so there could have been something favorable to the defendant in those questionnaires. So the lawyer should have been able to probe it. And Richard's absolutely right. It's a death penalty case. It's the ultimate possible sentence, and it has to be completely right. So start from scratch.
Alfredo is in Newark. Hello, Alfredo. You have a question?
Good morning, guys. Here in New Jersey, I saw a couple of times signs saying that marijuana charges are going to be expunged. My question is...
In New Jersey? Not in New Jersey, right?
In New Jersey, I live in Newark.
Uh-huh.
So my question is that if prostitution will be legal, I have charges. I have a solicited prostitution. So with the same logic, my charge will be expunged too?
Well, I guess it would depend on what the actual legislation says. I mean, right, gentlemen? I mean, so Alfredo's asking, I guess he's had prior charges for a prostitution arrest. If they legalize prostitution, do those charges automatically get expunged?
No.
No. It would depend on what the legislation would say, Alfredo. Sorry. Thank you. Thank you. My friend, Dr. Mason, is out on Long Island. Hello, Dr. Mason.
Frank, excellent show, and your guests are very intelligent, and that's why I wanted to call in. But I must say first, your son is the cutest in that Tip the Plaza on the $1 Million
Thanks
Man.
a lot.
I swear to God, yeah. All right, so why I called was I find you guys very intelligent, and I find I've been listening, and I don't know if you're all from New York. Dom, you're from New York, correct?
Yes, I am.
And you were disbarred in New York, am I correct?
Yeah, I believe all three of these gentlemen are
vehemently
disbarred in New York.
with an exclamation point at the end.
Yeah.
No. Listen. What, the thing I know a lot about this because one of my friends, he passed away, was an appellate judge in. He was like a lot older than me. He was in the 90s, but like a mentor, William Thompson on the Second Department, and he was very tough. So I would, because I was on the charity with him, with judges in bracket and judges and lawyers against breast cancer, and a couple of my friends have physicians. Anyway, long story short, why don't you reapply for your license? Because a disbarment in New York is really not a disbarment. It's only a 7-year suspension.
Yeah,
And
I guess Andrew is in the best position to answer that because I know Dom and Richard are still at various stages and fighting their own legal cases. But Andrew, you've been out of prison for a while now. Have you looked at reapplying for your law license?
I have looked. I'm a little bit different because I was never actually admitted in New York. I was admitted in Washington, D.C. and Georgia. So I'm actually...
And federally, I guess.
And federally,
right?
right. And so... I'm actually going to apply to be admitted in New York. Uphill battle, and believe it or not, I actually have to take a bar exam in July.
So is that your plan? You're going to do that?
That's my plan.
Oh, all right.
That'll be
Well,
my first hurdle. I mean, people have done, 14, 15 years for attempted murder, and they're, rehabilitated, and they're, admitted to practice and doing well. So.
Well, if they don't admit you, all have to do is attempt to kill somebody and then try again.
All you have to show is that you're a person of good moral conscience at this time.
Then we're all out of luck. Dr. Mason, thank you. I'll be in touch.
thank you. Thanks, Frank.
Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
guys.
Take care. Let me, while we're talking about death penalty cases, there's two more cases that I want to bring to your attention before we run out of time. Fascinating case out of Texas. This was the front page of the New York Daily News on Sunday. This woman who was slated to be executed last week, Melissa Lucio, I think the high criminal court in Texas made the right decision on Monday by ordering a halt to this execution. This is a mother of 14, Hispanic woman, convicted of killing her 2-year-old child more than a decade ago in a case that has now drawn bipartisan outrage. The entire time, Melissa Lucio has maintained her innocence, and the calls for leniency have become widespread in Texas, which is rare when it comes to death penalty cases in Texas. But Democratic state legislators, Republican state legislators, and now the Criminal Court of Appeals in Texas is pressing the pause button on her execution. What's the story here, Dom?
Well, the story is that there probably was not a crime committed, and that there were questionable interrogation techniques used, and that the child died from a fall, and it was not her fault, and the police took advantage of her and got her to say, "I guess I did it." And that this is a problem. This is not an isolated case. There was the case of Natasha Tiger in New York, who was the nurse who gave her 10-year-old disabled charge a bath, and his skin turned red, and they said that she tried to scald him, and she ended up taking a plea, and then it comes out later in a civil suit that her parents brought that the kid had a condition that brought that out.
Wow.
And then they won't vacate her plea. She took the plea because 4 months in jail is better than like 7.
Sure. Yeah. 7 years.
There's a case of Andrew Kowalski in Dutchess, who I know it's not a famous case. I know his situation, the same thing. There's a case of the woman in Australia with the 4 kids who died over a period of time. I don't recall her name right now, but there's all these medical experts saying that, 4 children may have died young in her charge, but there's a genetic defect in the family. So now they're trying to get her pardoned because she's gone through all her steps.
So you think she may end up getting her whole conviction vacated potentially?
It sounds like it should happen.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about, being very close to being killed last week, and now possibly because of the attention this case is getting, being close to being let go out of prison. Andrew, any thoughts on this one?
Well, in this case, there wasn't actually a false confession, as Dom pointed out correctly. She made a statement that she may have been responsible for the death. But what people don't understand is no one can ever understand, well, if you haven't committed a crime, how could you say that you committed a crime? Innocence Project, begun by Barry Scheck and continued on, they found that out of their exonerations, 25% of the cases, there were false confessions. The police and federal agents do expert jobs at interrogations. They isolate, they put pressure on, they get somebody to question their own truth. So they actually people start to question their own memory. And there's various types of false confessions. You have persuaded false confessions. You have compliant false confessions. You're sitting in a room for hours and hours, and the police are essentially allowed to lie to you up to a point until it crosses over to the point where your confession's involuntary. And we can kind of get into the weeds with that. It's so common, Frank, that somebody's put under so much pressure and they go through a psychological cognitive dissonance where they actually tell on themselves, knowing oftentimes that they didn't do it, and sometimes coming to believe that they did do it.
And in her case, she was a victim of abuse over many years from husbands and boyfriends. And she was particularly susceptible. And the judge in the case would not let that kind of evidence in, which would show why she did certain things during the interrogation and said certain things and gave in at a certain point.
Richard, any dissenting view on this case or the false confession issue generally?
No, I think that one of the big issues here is that she's asserted her actual innocence in this case, and that there was false testimony and evidence that was hidden at the trial. And the issue here becomes prosecutorial misconduct. There's a lot of prosecutorial misconduct that goes on in cases, and it looks like that this was a case where there was prosecutorial misconduct. The question is, does it really ever get punished? And the answer is no. Prosecutors, are in a position where they can, do some really shady stuff with almost with impunity, with no real consequences.
Well, speaking of that, I want to make sure we touch upon this last case. I spoke about this on the radio the other day, and people weighed in with varying views. It's the story of Darrell Howard, who spent 24 years in prison for a double murder he didn't commit. His conviction was vacated in 2016 after a judge found both police and prosecutorial misconduct. So last year, a federal jury agreed that the lead detective, Darrell Dowdy, had fabricated evidence, and the jury awarded this fella, Darrell Howard, $6 million. Yet now the city of Durham in North Carolina is refusing to pay him. How do they get away with this? Anybody that wants to answer that is welcome.
It's a stumper, Frank.
Right. Are they appealing the award?
The argument is this: they're saying that by virtue of the fact that there was police misconduct and there was falsification of evidence, planting of evidence, that they don't have to cover the police officer. And this is a tactic that's been used by municipalities before, where they basically tell the officer, we're not covering you, number one, and number two, just file for bankruptcy, and this guy can't get anything. So it's a real problem because they spent about $4 million, prosecuting this guy and defending the verdict, and they're still, indignant about the fact that they've done anything wrong, the prosecutors. So
Richard, let me ask you a question. Is it are they saying that he was acting outside the scope of his duties when he falsified the evidence? Is that their argument?
Yeah, the city's refusing to indemnify him for acting without outside the scope of his employment.
Because in federal court, you can't sue a state. You can sue an individual for violation of civil rights, but you can only sue the municipality, I believe, under the respondeat superior theory. And that's where they're trying to disengage this thing and say, well, it's his problem because he was acting outside the scope of what we wanted him to do.
All right, gentlemen, the hour has flown by. Dom, is that debate on May 2nd open to the public? Can anyone go, or is it closed?
It is, but I think it might be sold out.
All right, okay. Well, you have
my debate on May 6th before the Supreme Court in Richmond County is open to the public.
Are you coming up for that back to New York State, Richard, or are you doing that remotely?
Oh no, I'm going to probably be virtual that day. I can't leave under federal
Keep us posted on that, and Andrew, you'll have to keep us posted with how your studying for the bar exam goes.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. Coming up next hour, we got a lot to get to. We'll talk Atlantic City and death. Not at the same time. A lot to get to. This is The Other Side of Midnight. Until next hour, keep asking questions.